A quick thank you to all of my patrons. Your support is heavily appreciated. Oh god, Little Busters was such an emotional roller coaster. Could really use a pick-me-up for my next watch. Alright, wonder what I should go with. Huh? SukaSuka? What's that? 週末何してますか? 忙しいですか? つけてもらっていいですか? What kind of shitty oversized title is that? Well, it looks like your generic fantasy light novel. Can't say I'm very interested in those, if at all, but, well, my friend recommended it to me, and he has decent taste, so, fuck it. Let's give it a shot. Maybe it'll be surprisingly enjoyable. She's the happiest girl in the world. Hello everyone and welcome to another review, and yes, this time we're once again talking about some obscure title because let's be real, if I don't tell you about these things, nobody else will. So, this time we're delving into a light novel series known as What Will You Do at the End of the World? Are you busy? Will you save us? Terrible generic oversized light novel title, check. Just saying right now though, nobody actually calls it that because of course we don't. Most sane people like me, and I assume you, will just call it WorldEnd or SukaSuka. And I'm sure the title alone is going to elicit some groans due to how long it is. We all know the state of the modern light novel industry. There's like 1,000,001 fantasy isekai light novels with maybe like one gimmick to make it interesting, and is otherwise consisting of relatively forgettable characters, bland stories, uninteresting worlds which are just completely uninspiring to the point it makes me question whether I may actually have the capabilities to become an excellent writer if my ideas are put to paper. Although even if they are, I wonder if they'll be recognized by the public since everyone seems to only want more generic light novel power fantasies to shovel in their face with almost nothing. With all of that being said, basically when it comes to me, any light novel fantasy of any kind becomes a really hard sell because everything just doesn't feel like they stand out, isekai or not. And not gonna lie, initially, I had my reservations with this story as well. Like, massive reservations. And when it started, it really didn't seem that special either. But, I take it all back now, and I'm happy to say that. Sometimes there really is just that diamond in the rough, that underrated gem that you may find in a quarry full of grey monochrome rock. So, was SukaSuka one of those gems I speak of? I wonder. SukaSuka takes place in a fantastical world 500 years into the future. As the name implies, the world itself is essentially at the brink of apocalypse, with mysterious beasts appearing on the surface one day, driving the human species to apparent extinction as a result. In an attempt to survive, the remaining populace fled and created homes on mysterious floating pieces of land in the sky known as the Sky Islands, in order to keep themselves out of reach from the remaining beasts that lay below. Our main character is Willem Kamesh, a human that was cursed to be petrified after a massive battle in the past, and after 500 years he was excavated and depetrified back to life, only for him to find that everything around him has changed since he went under. With not a fragment of his original life intact, as well as the fact that he lives in a fantastical society where people who don't have any sort of animalistic feature to their face are ridiculed and avoided, Willem drags himself around the Sky Islands where he simply just doesn't care anymore, barely fending for survival and just existing with no purpose. However, one day he's given the opportunity to get a job for the military despite his status as a disfeatured jobless dude, and that's to be a manager and caretaker for some military weapons. Having nothing better to do, he accepts and heads to his new home, only to find that the weapons storage facility is not a warehouse, but rather a large orphanage. and he soon finds that the weapons that he'll be caring for aren't swords or bows, but rather young girls. Girls created for the sole purpose of defending the islands from the beasts that attack them. These girls are called leprechauns, a species of fairy that are made from the remnants and memories of children who died at a young age. They are made for the sole purpose of combat, and thus aren't considered human, created to wield mystical swords known as dug weapons, which are made from various stone talismans that hold immense power, but they also can't be wielded by any normal person. SukaSuka itself doesn't have much of a goal in its story at first. Rather, it's mostly really about following Willem as he cares for the leprechauns while learning more about the world step by step. Whether it's learning about the rules of society, or discovering more about the leprechauns themselves and their biology, or even darker secrets relating to the beasts and the past of the world. However, this is where I go into the difference between light novel and anime adaptation. See, the biggest thing about the anime adaptation is that it's very short. Only a 12-episode runtime, in fact, and let me tell you, it wasn't a lot of time. The SukaSuka light novel spans 6 volumes, and with a measly 12 episodes, they really didn't have enough time to work everything in at all. As such, so far, the anime only adapts half of the full story of SukaSuka, ending the story at volume 3. Not to mention, even whilst it only adapted half of the story, it was still a really close call. This is where I get into the main problem of the anime adaptation, which is basically the entire first half. If you haven't noticed already, SukaSuka has a surprisingly unique world for your typical light novel fantasy. This isn't some simple fantasy with generic spells and powers, no. This world has its own history, rules, and races, all which you have to familiarize yourself with over the course of the series. So, obviously, SukaSuka requires a lot of world building to introduce all of that to you. So the story does its darn best to shove it all in your face in the first half, and while the light novel did it to a tolerable extent, the anime has to rush all of that even further, which unfortunately creates a problem where the characters aren't ones you really ingrain yourself in quite as much as you'd like. The first half feels very methodical, and like you're consuming exposition and new information while showing the characters' lives on the side. And there's really just a case of where there's not enough time to feel a genuine connection and familiarity with both the world or the characters. You're really just left to take it all in all at once. And the worst part is, that expansive world building I talked about, specifically the parts relating to the past of the Earth and the history of the world, most of that is only touched in volumes 4 to 6 of the light novel. As such, the anime, which only adapted volumes 1 to 3, just didn't get to it. There are a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of things that are shown that just don't end up going anywhere. Yeah, SukaSuka's anime suffers heavily from the only one season disease. If you plan on going anime only, you're going to have a lot of missing pieces, and while you can get a solid chunk of the world, you definitely don't feel like you've experienced all of it. And I can honestly see that being a huge point of contention for some people. But the anime seemed to be aware of this, and has thus swapped priorities a teensy bit. See, the lucky thing about SukaSuka is while many things are left incomplete as a result of only adapting 3 volumes of the light novel, there is one thing that the early volumes focus on. And this leads me to talking about the cute girl on the light novel cover art. One Kuthali Nota Senioris. Willem meets Kuthali at the beginning of the story, with her literally falling on top of him. I'll talk more about Kuthali in the characters section, but for now I will mention that she's an extremely important character of the series, and the first 3 light novels heavily focuses on her. As such, the anime took it upon themselves to shift their focus and make the adaptation less about Willem and the world, and more about Kuthali as a character instead. In the anime, her story is focused on by far the most, and takes an even further precedent compared to the light novel. It's to the point where you can argue that in the anime adaptation, Kuthali is more of a main character than even Willem, because she is the driving force to the story that the anime covers so far, and boy does it pay off. While the first half of the anime adaptation feels rushed, the second half flourishes. With all of the essential world building gone over in the first half, the second half has all the time it needs to actually properly show off the characters, make yourself acclimated to them, and most of all, get you to care. I'm gonna be real, the first half, while I thought was fun popcorn entertainment, I didn't feel much for. It was just fine. But the second half, that was when I really began caring for all of the individual characters and slowly find myself getting attached to them. It's an enjoyable ride that hits its storytelling beats much better than the first half did. When the second half rolls in, by God you'll give a shit about this world and the characters that inhabit it. And it leads to one hell of a surprisingly beautiful, emotional finale that I consider extremely well earned. So overall, the story itself doesn't have the strongest start. The world building is heavy regardless of the medium you consume it in, and the story, while intriguing, is also not particularly engaging until a certain point. The anime does it even less justice by trying to rush most of it down in the first half, while sacrificing being able to familiarize yourself with the world and the characters. However, with most of the world building done over with in the first half, the second half shines with its characters finally being able to properly blossom as you begin to care for all of them, which all culminates in fantastic character arcs and one hell of an ending that I'm surprised didn't make me cry upon my first watch, because God, does it hit me right in the feels. So with that in mind, I give the overall story of SukaSuka an 8 out of 10 for the light novel and a 6 out of 10 for the anime as it is so far. While I like the story, the messy pacing and world building exposition hurts it a lot, especially in the anime where a full half of it suffers. However, the score for the anime will get higher once we get a season 2, as the main problem I see is the myriad of unanswered questions as a result of cutting off the story early. Okay, this is where SukaSuka really shines. As I've said in the story section, the characters somewhat suffer in the first half due to a lack of proper focus on them. You get to know their basic personalities, then they sort of just blend into the background while Willem learns more about the world. At least until the second half where everyone gets to shine properly. So, let's go over them. Our protagonist, Willem Kamesh, is actually quite solid, which I am so happy about. He's not my favorite main character ever, mind you, but in a world where isekai power fantasies with overpowered cardboard protagonists dominate the market, Willem is surprisingly not that at all. In fact, he's quite the opposite. Willem's actual personality is that of a mature man who, while is nice and friendly, is evident that he's sort of stopped caring about his own well-being. Willem is technically powerful in that he's well trained in combat and has some supernatural speed due to his status as a legendary hero from before he was petrified. However, after his battle, his body suffered permanent internal damage, so when he fights, his internal injuries reopen and he literally breaks down from the inside, meaning he can honestly hardly do anything despite his amazing combat potential that he worked hard to get through training. This is the opposite of a typical power fantasy. This man literally cannot fight without injuring himself and gambling his life. And as the story goes on, you really begin to realize at times just how powerless he can be as a result of that. That alone sets him apart from many light novel main characters, and combined with his whole alienation of the world he's in, I just want this poor dude to be happy. Watching him slowly learn about the leprechauns and begin to care for them each is really sweet. He may have met the leprechauns due to duty as his job, but his father-like love for all of them is a genuine emotion that builds over time and is damn convincing. For other noteworthy characters, there's General Limeskin, who is a wholesome dad commander, and Nyglotha the Troll, who is an overly wholesome mother figure that can also kick some hard ass. Although, Nyglotha also has a really genuine relationship with each of the leprechauns, and similar to Willem, you can really feel the love that she has for each one. Speaking of the leprechauns though, they are indeed also quite noteworthy characters, and yes, they are all very sweet girls. We call them the Daughter Brigade. This story is full of cute baby girls that all deserve and yearn for warm hugs and head pats. Those whose smiles will bring happiness to your soul and peace to your heart. If you're the kind of person who likes being surrounded by precious daughters, this show will appeal to you, no doubt. As a side note, please remember that if you do anything further or dare I say, lewd, I will personally nail you to the floor through your hands and feet, pull out your nails, slowly skin you with an apple peel. First off, we have the four young ones, Tiat, Lakesh, Kolon, and Panabal. They each serve as charming side characters, and while none are major, they help drive home the fact that each one of these leprechauns are their own individual. Panabal is the casual sass master, Colin is the energetic mischief, Lakesh is the shy and timid one, while Tiat is the kind, cheerful type. None of them play any major roles until the very end of the light novel story, but they help show the nature of growing up as a leprechaun child. Also, you may want to remember all of them because they sort of become the protagonists of SukaSuka's sequel light novel, SukaMocha. But that's a review for another day. Especially since I can't find any fucking translations. God damn it, society, why do you forget this story exists? As for other leprechauns, we finally get to our main five. Aithia, Nephren, Rontalk, Noft, and of course, Cuthali. Let's go through them one by one. Noft and Rantalk aren't much in the anime. They appear midway and don't get enough time to really get to know them well, but we are introduced to them. Noft is the easygoing tomboy, while Rantalk is the complete opposite, being calm and logical. They're only really focused on in volumes 4 to 6, so don't expect to see them much in the anime, but I do like them overall. Nephren is a precious kudere cutie, described as comfy and warm, yet also loyal and caring to those she recognizes as friends. Volumes 3 to 6 especially focus on her, where she slowly begins to take a secondary protagonist role, and becomes an extremely important character. If I was chosen to actually adopt any of these girls, I'd probably go with Nephren, because she just makes me smile every time. What a sweetheart. Next is Aithia. She's similar to Noft in that she's a casual and cheerful fun lover, but she's also got a side to her that's extremely kind. She's very likable and doesn't come off as overbearing despite her personality tropes. And over the course of the story, after you learn a certain thing about her, you begin to really respect her. She's an older sister type of character, and reminds me of one of my favorite characters in fiction, Gin Minowa. So, what can I say? I'm a bit biased. That said, she isn't my favorite. So, it's time to finally talk about her. As I said in the story segment, Cuthali's character gets a massive focus in the first 3 volumes, and in the anime, she is made even more prevalent. Cuthali is a hardworking but slightly ditzy older sister. She acts mature most of the time, but also has a side of her that's easily embarrassed and almost childlike. At first, it's hard to recognize why the story spends so much time on her, as she doesn't really get enough focus despite her screen time, leading her to feel like somewhat of a filler existence. However, after a certain tragic event, Cuthali's character begins to really bloom. She matures a lot in the second half, becoming a lot more independent, reliable, willing to learn many things, and care for her family, all while doing her best to live her own life to the fullest. Even though I didn't care for her at first, throughout the second half, Cuthali quickly became my favorite character of the whole story, and is someone I have still yet to forget weeks after I had already watched the anime for the first time. Her relationship with Willem felt a bit forced at first, but as the second half goes on, that feeling disappears. With Willem being depressed and full of emptiness, he finds purpose in making the leprechauns happy, and that includes Cuthali as well. Whilst Willem teaches Cuthali many lessons and firsts that allow her to value herself further and develop a lot. The two have a close, well-built relationship that feels genuine. Each other's existence has a positive influence on the other, as both do help each other become at peace with their individual lives. They are a fantastic duo, and one that I heavily appreciate. If nothing else, the anime does a spectacular job with Cuthali's character arc, as she is easily the highlight and most memorable part of SukaSuka. Even after the story stops giving her a focus in later volumes, Cuthali's character remains a prevalent image throughout, and for her arc specifically, the anime ended at the perfect moment. The final episode contains a powerful scene that I still think back on with vivid memory. Cuthali is easy to emphasize with, cheer for, cherish, and by the end of volume 3, I might just call you heartless if you can't say that you appreciate the girl. Overall, the cast of SukaSuka is both very memorable and easy to like, a breath of fresh air in the world of generic isekai power fantasies with one-dimensional dudes. Both light novel and anime get a 9 out of 10 for characters. As while the light novel focused more on the general cast, the anime truly did amazing justice for Cuthali and Willem. They are, if nothing, an extremely memorable cast. Now for this category, I'm mostly going to be talking about the anime adaptation because, what kind of technical quality are we going to talk about a light novel? The illustrations are good, as you'd expect. Big surprise. So thus we're going to be talking about the anime animation and art style. SukaSuka was animated by Satellite and C2C, the former being known for Log Horizon and Symphogear, while the latter is known for, well, barely anything, honestly. As for the actual art and animation itself, well, it's okay. If you ask me, the art style is like the definition of unimpressive, but like, it's not bad, it's just really fucking generic. There's really not much about this anime that stands out from a visual standpoint. With the exception of a few special things like the tuning of the dug weapons and the venom wings that the leprechauns use to fly, it literally looks like a throwaway low-budget standard light novel adaptation, so like, man, I don't know what to say. The show really doesn't have that much of a special visual identity. The OST though is where the technical quality looks up a bit more, because in my opinion the OST is not bad. It's not particularly amazing, but it's overall solid with some very nice violin and piano in the various tracks. It's solid and one I consider to be a good complement to the story. As usual though, the vocal themes are what I remember the most, and for once, it's neither the opening or ending. Two insert themes are what really stick out of my mind when I think of SukaSuka. First off, the cover of the song Scarborough Fair by Yamada Tamaru. It is a beautiful cover of the traditional English ballad that instantly immersed me in the fantasy setting when I first heard it being used in the show. Not to mention, the lyrics fit so well for the characters of Cuthly and Willem. In fact, the cover changes the perspective of the singer from being a male to female, which leads to some very tasteful symbolism between the two characters through this song. Finally, we got the insert song Always in My Heart. My friend actually sung this at karaoke night, and this was what got me interested in the series for real. It is an absolutely beautiful song that I listen to extremely often nowadays. It is a song that very evidently reflects the character of Cuthly, to the point I associate this song as her song. And the memories and scenes that I associate with this tune have the ability to elicit genuine tears from me. And damn, I will never forget this track for as long as I live. It is so impactful. Still, even with those two truly gorgeous tracks, the general mediocre art and animation don't really save this from being a mediocre production. So overall, I'll give this category a 6 out of 10. If I haven't made it abundantly clear at this point, I very much consider SukaSuka to be an underrated gem. Despite the massively overcompensative title and predictable fantasy setting, SukaSuka proves itself to be much more than the generic self-insert power fantasy that most people would assume it to be. It is a story with an interesting, deep world that has a massive history that, while not properly explored, feels expansive and full of mysteries waiting to be solved. And the characters. A wonderful cast of characters that I found myself truly caring for in the end, despite the first half not doing any of them justice. This is definitely a story that had a fantastic idea, although whether the potential was fully realized is debatable. I'll admit, while I love SukaSuka, the story is not without its evident flaws, especially in the anime adaptation. The world building, while expansive, could be toned down a bit, especially where the first half was essentially screwed over as a result of it. But damn if the second half and the remaining light novels didn't make it all worth it. The fantastic characters, the great world and story, so many daughters to love and protect, it's a really nice time. The thing about SukaSuka is that it's really damn hard to sell due to its status. The light novel origins, the fantasy setting, the overly long title, and not to mention the anime adaptation. The thing that's supposed to boost the light novel attention has a boring ass first half, a bland art style, and mediocre animation to put everyone off that may be interested in this goddamn story. I say this because I was one of them, and let's be honest, you probably would think so too if I didn't already tell you that this story has genuine merit. Granted, when I went on Twitter and ranted about this show, I found a surprising amount of people that have actually seen or read SukaSuka and love it as much as I do. But otherwise, I haven't seen many people talk about it specifically, and that sucks because I believe this deserves actual recognition. Like, SukaSuka deserves to be talked about on the same tier as the ultra-famous fantasy light novel titles like Sword Art Online, Konosuba, No Game No Life, and ReZero. That's how good I think SukaSuka is. Yet, I know it's not going to get that recognition due to its subpar anime adaptation and unassuming nature. And it's such a damn shame. SukaSuka is genuinely great, not amazing. Heck, it's far from being one of my favorite stories, but it is really good on its own. And if nothing else, is very memorable when you give it a chance. Absolutely watch it if you want to meet a colorful cast of lovable girls, both fun and cute, along with various other characters that hold their own well against the Daughter Brigade. If you enjoy your fantasies with intricate, deep world building and history, you'll find exactly that here. However, if you're not going to read the light novels, expect a lot of unanswered questions due to the anime being an incomplete adaptation. Also, the first half is, as I've said, painful. It's worth it, but do go into the show expecting relative mediocrity until the second half hits. Also, if you're the kind of person who doesn't want to cry, yeah, maybe consider avoiding this story as the ending is, as I've said, very emotional. Overall, I award SukaSuka with a recommendation of great. Despite its flaws, it's a very enjoyable story that in the short amount of time given, presents a surprisingly rich world with amazing characters that you can easily fall in love with. For me, this world, those characters, and that bittersweet, emotional story, they have become cherished memories of mine, and if nothing else, I know that this wonderful, underappreciated story, as well as the vivid memories of Cuthali Nota Senores, will remain forever, always in my heart. With that, we conclude this review on SukaSuka or WorldEnd. I hope you enjoyed this review and look forward to whatever I do next. When that day happens, I'll once again see you somewhere else on the internet. Until then, peace!